All right, we get to start speech perception. I have some questions here that we're going to come back to, and I hope if you can think through them that we're going to answer these questions. I'm hoping we answer them nicely for you, that you come back to oh yeah, what is a speech sound and how do we recognize it? How do we know where words begin and end? Well, that sounds like it's really simple. We're going to find out that it's one of those things like object recognition, that this word recognition and figuring out where words begin and end is kind of incredible that we do it so easily without really having to think hard and process and think where were those words starting and ending. But if you listen to foreign languages very much, you'll just, and which you can go do, right? You can go on YouTube and find anything in a foreign language and you're like, I have no idea. It just sounds like gobbledygook. So we'll talk about that. And then how do we handle differences within and between speakers? So how do we hear a word, a particular word as a particular word, even though I'm going to say it differently in different times, different people are going to say it differently from me, and so forth. The speech stimulus, the physical stimulus, known as the acoustic signal, we are creating these vowels and consonants by the position and movement of these structures, of these articulators within the vocal apparatus. So our articulators include the tongue, the lips, the teeth, the jaw, the soft palate, that we are moving these parts of our mouths and changing the shape of the vocal tract. Sometimes, so with the vowels, it is this overall shape and resonance that gives us a vowel of E versus O versus Ah. Whereas when we're talking about consonants, it's more about how are we stopping the air, or how are we sometimes it's more of a, so the fricatives, it's more like we're creating friction with sh, s, f, those kinds of fricatives. We have affricatives, so ch and j, as in jar and char. And I'll show some of these phonemes. So we are creating those sounds, those phonemes, that acoustic signal, with these articulators. Okay, and I'm going to describe the speech spectrogram. So the speech spectrogram is when we're looking at this acoustic signal on a spectrogram, we can see that the overall shape of the vocal tract is creating some resonant frequency, and we're going to have these different formants, so these peaks of pressure at a number of different frequencies. And so if we look at the figure, had is what's going across, so time going across the x-axis. And now, instead of looking at a specific frequency and how that's going across the x-axis, as we did with our perfect sine wave or our complex tones, even those periodic sounds, where what we were looking then on the y-axis was amplitude, now we have frequency on the y-axis, because this is a pretty complex signal, and it's going to be changing as we are. So when I'm holding the a in had, there's some periodicity to it, but remember, a lot of this is aperiodic, because I'm constantly changing with the h, the d. When I'm talking, I have ch's and d's and p's and all of these sounds that are stopping the air, or fricatives that are giving me friction to the air. And so what we see on the speech spectrogram, if I'm going to try to do this right, is these peaks of pressure with these frequencies. So that form F1 is our primary formant there, and then F2 and then F3. We have three formants where you can see that it's darker there, and what that darkness means, that is actually showing me the amplitude. And it's those relationships between those formants that give me the ah in this case, or really the had, that particular ah that we hear when we are between the h and the d. We also talk about formant transitions, which we'll see in a little while, that they're very brief. They're actually very difficult to find, in my opinion. On a speech spectrogram, I did do some measuring of speech sounds at some point in my career, in my scientific career, and I thought it was really difficult. I'm going to be honest. I don't think I was finding the exact places where the beginnings and ends of words were happening necessarily. It's difficult. What we mostly see is the resonant frequency, those different formants that tell us about the quality of the vowel sound. I'm going to do consonants and give them their just due. The consonants are caused by some closure or constriction of that vocal tract, and the sound depends on the place of articulation. So I have the d down there, and you'll notice a couple of the things I like for people to really understand is the speech spectrogram and how we're looking at time on the x-axis, frequency on the y-axis, and those dark bands giving us the intensity or amplitude. The other thing we're going to really focus on are these phonemes. So d there, that D that's in those forward slashes, that denotes, those forward slashes denote that this is a phoneme in linguistics. And so this is an alveolar stop, which means I'm putting my tongue against the alveolar ridge, which is the ridge just behind my teeth. And these are good things. So I'm going to give you some phonemes. I'm going to encourage you to say the words if you can read them. They're in phonemics. They give you the phonemes for them, and so some of them you might not know what they're trying to denote there. But so feel the phonemes in your mouth. And so if you could go d, d, the place of articulation is the alveolar ridge. The manner of articulation is that it is a stop. I am stopping the air. And then we have this slight rush of air as we move our tongue away. It's also a voiced. And we have a voice or voiceless consonants. And I gave the example of jar and char earlier. So those affricatives, jar is j is voiced, char is the ch in char is voiceless. For the d, that's voiced, t is voiceless. So if you feel your throat as you're saying something like dis, you can feel your vocal cords vibrating at the d as soon as you start saying it. I'm making up words now, but if you do tis or tis, we'll have an actual word tis. When you're making that t, your vocal cords do not start vibrating there. They start vibrating at the vowel. So that's the voiced versus voiceless. I'm going to go a little bit more through manner of articulation. So again, this is usually something where I hand a handout out to the class and I tell them to feel these sounds, these phonemes, as they're saying these words, if you can tell what they're saying, if you can tell what the words are. I've worked a lot to make this try to make this more readable on the slides. But so we have the manner of articulation coming down from that. We have stops like p and b, as in pat and bat. I've already done t and d, as we're going voiceless and then voiced, as in tack or dig, and then k and g, as in cat or get. The other thing, so you can see the place of articulation is going across the top there. And so that p and b, we call it bilabial because we're putting our two lips together. The alveolar are the ones that we're putting our tongue up against the alveolar ridge. And then the velar, k and g, we're back there at the velum. Okay, so if you go back to that picture of the articulators, I have another one that I'm going to plop in here and not say much, but just kind of let you look at it, that we're back there at the velum. Fricatives, so back to manner of articulation. Fricatives, which I think of as giving us some friction, as in f and v, or the as in then. And again, you can pause this and feel these in your mouth. I actually usually have people do this with a partner and have the other person put their fingers over their ears for just a little while and do some trying to do some lip reading and realize how really hard that is. And then affricatives, which are something between a stop and a fricative, which is so the not really completely fricative. Ch and j, I've given those a few times now. Nasals, where we're really using our nasal cavity. We have a few nasals in English, m, n, and ng, as in sing. And then the liquids or glides, as in l and r for our liquids, and w and y for our glides. And the other thing, this picture gives us basically the phonemes of the English language. I know that it's might seem kind of silly to you, but it's a little bit controversial how many phonemes exactly we have if you're in the linguistics field and in phonetics. But then it also has our vowels, where whether it's high, middle, or low, and kind of so where that resonance is in the mouth, where we are creating the resonance the most, and then kind of where our tongue is on the front, center, and back, which is also influencing where the resonance is in the mouth. So again, I'm going to encourage you to pause, stop, and then look at this slide and feel some of these phonemes in your mouth. And briefly, to come back to the articulators, I like this picture better than the one from Goldstein. This is from Cognition by Ashcraft and Radvansky. So this was one of the first books I used, and I thought these were really good pictures. The one of the phonemes and this one of the articulators are both from that book. But you can see really clearly and hear the velum. If you notice where back at the back of the soft palate there is where I talked about the k and g being created. We also have, so we have a glottal fricative. If you look at the glottis back at 9, back in the back of the throat, h is created by that over there, and we have a not, what's not a phoneme, but that we use it as in uh-oh, it's back there in the glottis. But German has lots of neat glottal fricatives that I like the sound of. It's in like ach and ich, those sounds. But so you can think about your articulators. You can go back and look at the phonemes figure and really, again, feel these in your mouth. Feel these in your mouth and think about how these different articulators are creating those sounds. Okay, and some points about phonemes. So those sounds are called phonemes, and phonemes are the smallest segment of speech that if we change it, it changes the meaning of the word. Another way to say this is that they are linguistically contrastive. So they change the meaning of a word. So bit has 3 phonemes, b, I, and t, because if we change the b to p, we change the meaning of the word. We change bit to pit. If we change the I to a, we change bit to bat. If we change the t to d, we change bit to bid. So these phonemes, it's really, it's addressing our perception of speech, or really the representation that we have of these sounds in our minds. And we hear them because they are linguistically contrastive in our language, because they do and can change the meanings of those words. So phonemes. Oh, phonemes, y'all. They're awesome. And I've had some really great grad students being my teaching assistants throughout the years, and one of them was from linguistics. It was a complicated year, and I ended up with this student from linguistics, and then they don't get very much money. Psychology students make more money than a lot of other students that aren't in a science, and because we have money. And so she ended up staying my TA for, she kind of came to me because I lost my TA, and then she stayed with me for a long time because she was awesome. And she ended up giving the speech perception lectures for years, for like at least a year and a half. And since she was from linguistics, she included this information about really our allophones, or how we are producing those speech sounds, because that was something she was interested in. And partly because of this MRI of speech articulation, that little video is really fun. And thinking about how this works to me is also really fun, that we are producing these different speech sounds. I'm going to recommend this video. It's I usually show the whole thing. I don't think she actually did, but it shows the place of articulation. And I will say that she says, I don't have that little worm in my mouth, which is his tongue moving around as he's rapping in the MRI. But yeah, it's fun to watch. Okay, I'm going to do this distinction between phonemes and allophones. I actually had a teaching assistant who came from linguistics, and she ended up doing the speech perception lecture, and she added some of this, and I ended up loving it. So this was really kind of her backgrounds of how we produce or articulate these phonemes, and there were a few parts of this that I love. So I've kept it all these years. So the phonemes, being linguistically contrastive, that they change the meaning of a word, and they end up, so they are how we hear the sound, right? So our perception of the sound, or the representation we have for a particular sound in our mind. Allophones are the articulatory production, or the articulation of those phonemes. They are about production, right? So she gives us some examples here. So if we look at pattern, the word pattern, which she has at the top, in the forward slashes, we're denoting that those are phonemes. So pattern, which that is actually what I'm more used to looking at. And then in the brackets are our allophones. And so one of the points she makes is that we can have various allophones that basically make up a phoneme, right? Because we have this perception or representation in our mind of t, and we hear t in pattern, even though in pattern the t is actually a flap, so that fourth one over. And we're going to see some examples of all of these, but like so that if I'm saying spot and I'm ending a word with t, or stop and that t is somewhere in the middle, then I have that first t in brackets. But if I say top, and you'll notice, so you can do the difference between stop, what was the other one I used? Bought. I'm using a different one because I've forgotten, but bought, where t is at the end. And you can put your hand in front of your mouth and you don't feel this little bit of whisper air. But if you do top, you can feel this little wisp of air. Well, that's what we're seeing, that little H above the P in pattern. That's what that's denoting. That's what that second T is in, as in top, is denoting that it has this aspiration to it. The next one over, the next allophone over is ch. We'll see sometimes t sounds like, or we're creating it like we would create a ch, but we still kind of, we hear it as t. And same with the flap, as in pattern, and then the glottal stop there at the end. So let me come to my next. So if we look at the allophones that make up t, okay, pats and bet, that t, that's just the regular t. Tuesday, tired, those ones you can feel that aspiration that I was talking about. The ch, I usually can't come up with these without looking at something. When do we make that ch sound? Most of us use a ch kind of sound in retrieve or feature. But again, when I say feature, you really hear it as a ch sound, because that's the phoneme. Butter, pattern, most of us do a flap there, unless you're English, you might say butter. Kitten, button, we have what's called a glottal stop. So that way back at the glottis, there's a little stop there. But again, we hear that as a ch. And she has these questions on here that I really loved everything that she did about all of this. But so I like these questions a lot to think about. What are the articulatory features that are shared between these different allophones? You might try pronouncing the words above with the different allophones and see how they feel or how they sound. So if I say retrieve or feature or hattern, where I have the actual t there, or if I try to, and some of them are practically impossible to say, like try saying Tuesday with the glottal stop at the beginning, or Tuesday with the ch. It changes it completely. With the glottal stop, I can't even do it. So that's a fun, I think, thing to do. You can see how easily entertained psycholinguists are. And then what are the different environments where we have these different allophones being present? So we're going to talk about how we have this co-articulation as we speak. And so the surrounding sounds are influencing how I create a specific sound. And so you can think about those environments or those contexts, so how you're co-articulating some of that. And I'm going to pause this here. I'm almost at 20 minutes. It's a perfect time to watch that video of the guy rapping in the MRI, which is just fun, and to go back and look at these slides and think about phonemes, think about allophones, feel those things in your mouth, think about how we have these different environments for different allophones, and then we'll talk about that co-articulation and that the fact that it creates this lack of invariance, that we have a lot of variance in our speech signal or our acoustic signal.